That's something we haven't even had a chance to complain about. This book has no atmosphere. There's no description. How do you write a book with zero atmosphere on the Titanic? There is something so magical about a boat that was called the Unsinkable Ship that was made at the height of technology, the height of luxury, that sinks on its maiden voyage, and you made me feel like I was in a mall. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It's me, your host, Maria, with my ruggedly handsome co-host, William.
Extra rugged, extra handsome. And what book are we doing today, Maria?
We are doing the book A Million to One by Adiba Jaigirdar. Is it Jai?
Guys, English is our first language. This is just going to happen every time.
Adiba Jaigirdar.
And this book is interesting because I'm trying to get us to do more recent books, and this one came out, I think, in January. And also, the cover looked good, and the concept sounded amazing. Girlsquad does a heist on the Titanic. Okay, I mean, come on, that sounds incredible. Here's something else you need to understand before we get into this.
Here's the tea.
Okay, so we were supposed to record this last week, but we couldn't because someone had health issues.
I couldn't speak.
So if I had to explain how I would have talked about this last week, it would have been, you guys know the beginning of the Iliad? Speak to me, O muse, of the rage of Achilles. That would have been, speak to me, O muse, of the rage of Will at having to read this ass book
that he picked.
I try to do stuff for the channel, guys. I've talked about this before. Heavy weighs the crown, pendulous swings the dick. And in the last week, a lot of my rage has left me. So we'll see if when we're describing the plot, if it comes back to me. But this was one of those like rage-inducing books we've read, which is just like, it is so incredibly mediocre that it infuriates me that I had to read it. It also has made me realize certain things about books in terms of how we rate them. In that, you know, when you're rating a video game, for example, you would have like different pillars, like, the story, 1 out of 5, the graphics, 1 out of 5, the gameplay, 1 out of 5. And then theoretically speaking, you would take those 5 and, you know, find add them together, divide them by the amount, and then you have your general score. But that is actually not how video games work, because you can put up with almost any bad thing if the gameplay is good. And if the gameplay is bad, it is incredibly hard to put through with anything else. I love the environment in BioShock Infinite. I love that just being in that world. The gameplay is so bad, I just can't get through it in follow-throughs. And so with books, I think often when we talk about, because a lot of times we'll try to be fair to books and say like, oh, this was a good book. It's not terribly written. The prose were pretty good. I think the one key metric to a book's quality is how easy it is to read. And this was just a slog. It's not terribly written, but I think that is the key metric we need to talk about with books.
I'm going to bring up a book that I found was easier to read than this, which is going to, I think, anger a lot of hearts on the internet. Light Lark was an easier read than this. I didn't enjoy Light Lark, but I got through it way quicker. It had pace, and one of the things that this book does, and it's something that Will mentioned multiple times, and it's absolutely true, anytime it builds a remote little baby amount of tension, it then just dispels all the attention because the characters then sit and navel gaze and then talk about it with each other. There was like one point where something like intense was happening, but the characters were making a very irrational decision in the moment, which just made it impossible. Like, there was a character who was my favorite. There was 2 characters who were my favorite of the group. They don't make it through this book. And I am sad in my own mind about it. But when I read their last scene together,
I actually blank on that scene because by that point I was so checked out. Like I did not care. I was not really paying attention. And I only really liked any of the characters because the voice actress does like a nicely bitchy character for one of them, like a nicely bitchy voice. And that's the only reason I really like her. Everyone else is just so incredibly bland and juvenile. And the thing is that, what do you, I can see you winding up to say something.
Angry Otter made this point. It is terribly written. There's a lot of water in the ocean.
So in the Discord, somebody posted that I think Angry Otter did that at one point when the Titanic has sunk. One of the characters says she looked around and all she could see was ocean or water or something like that.
There was water everywhere. And then Miss Allie Snow is calling you out. If I remember correctly, last weekend, Will was declaring that because of this book, you should have to pass a test to be an author.
Okay,
preferably
all right.
his test.
Here's what's up. This is, again, something that I have now realized about books. It's this. The free market is failing us when it comes to books. There are certain industries with which, and markets with which the free market does not pick the best thing. Healthcare. We don't get good outcomes from it. Because of inelastic demand, the free market is not good for handling it. iPhones, free market is good at handling. Books, though, we are consistently getting books that are not good. As a system, the free market is failing us and it does not work. So what we need some kind of a quality board.
Guys, please, just really quick, take everything he's saying with a grain of salt. Just, if not our patrons, they understand him, but any of you who might be stumbling on us the first time, please continue, William. I had to just say that.
That is management speaking. And so we need an independent board to review books before they're published so that we can decide, okay, which ones are good, which ones are bad, which authors should have to go to jail because they have released this book. That is the key thing I want you guys to understand. If there is one word, one thesis statement, one theme, restitution. That is what restitution. It is unimaginably unfair that authors just get to write a book and then just push it off like some radioactive jetsam into the world, and then it just sickens everyone it touches and they get to walk away. They get to walk away. I'm kind of doing a bit, but also kind of not.
He's doing a bit. Please.
I'm doing a bit, but this is sort of genuinely how I feel in that the free market is not getting as good outcomes from this. I get that we can't have a board because like that's complicated. I get we can't do these things, but like we aren't getting good outcome. We are getting a lot of bad books from the free market. And also it is unfair that writers just get to read a book and then we have to deal with the shitty radioactive remains of it. Restitution.
Yeah, but unfortunately, if we didn't have to do a podcast, we could have started it and gone, this wasn't great, and just ended it like most normal people. Unfortunately,
no, we would have already spent money on it. That is the case for fan fiction and free books. You don't complain about fan fiction because it's free, but this is a book. You would have wasted.
You can return books even on Kindle and audio books, as long as you haven't listened to a certain amount.
You have to have listened to a certain amount. This book actually, because some people will ask, why didn't we just stop reading it? Because you keep thinking the Titanic part is going to happen, where it sinks, and that's going to be interesting. And it happens so late in the book, and it isn't interesting at all.
If it wasn't for the podcast, by which we also make money, so we have to read it, I would have absolutely. I knew from chapter 2 that this book was going to be a bit of a slog.
I thought chapter 1 was actually pretty okay. I was like, okay, stuff is interesting. The one where she's just stealing the thing.
I hated it. I did not like it. I didn't like Horsifa from the minute her cocky ass. Because, like, I'll explain. We'll get into it.
The main character, by the way, is called Josepha, but it's Josepha. I'm assuming it's a Spanish. F-A. I'm assuming it's a Spanish word because J makes an H sound, so it's not Josepha, it's Josepha. But the narrator also kind of pronounces it Horsifer, and so like there's now an in-joke in the Discord that her name is Horsifer.
Yeah, so Lindbergh wrote it out for us. This is how it's spelt, and
oh, you're right, it is an F.
She gets called Horsifa. Like, there's just R's where there shouldn't be R's. But
And then Lindbergh said, I was waiting for the ship to sink. Like, how could that not be engaging? It wasn't. I don't understand. Also, Aaron says, but how can you ever get the time back? That is a good point, Maria. You can't get that time back. Actually, if you think of your life as a lot of moments, then really what the author is doing to you is killing you a little bit.
Oh my God. The absolute dramatics.
Restitution. Restorative justice.
Oh my God. Let's calm down. I'm gonna close the chapter on the restitution bit of this video, and we're gonna complain about the actual book now. We're all here for it.
To just restate again, it's one of these things where the book is not terrible, but I'm increasingly thinking that a book being a slog to get through is the most important metric of how good a book is, and this book is a slog.
It's a sloggy slog.
Maria, what were your overall impressions of this book now that I have said my bit about it?
So this book suffers from a couple things. Number one, the pacing is real weird. The way the author has decided, number one, to start it. Will said he liked the first chapter. I did not. I found it very rushed. One of the things that I mention a lot is I like to have a feel for my characters, know what their life is like before the like call to adventure comes in. Even in the way that like Novik does, where she just gives it a chapter, but she describes enough of what like the life was like prior to the moment the book starts that I feel like I understand what's happening. And this book just kind of like you're not couched in the characters' lives. You really only start learning things that make them feel like unique people halfway through the book. And it suffers from shitty main character syndrome. Horsifa I don't like her at all. She makes really weird decisions. The entire plan. So I've talked about it before where if I do not buy into the conceit of the book from like the first few chapters, it is very hard for me to get into it. And so I'm going to bring up, what was the one, Lore, the book we read called Lore. I hated the conceit of this book. Once the like beginning had ended and we got like halfway through the book, I was kind of just able to like hang with the plot of what was happening in that book because a lot of things were happening. Unfortunately, this book has very little actual stuff happening in it. So the conceit is just always there. And the conceit of this book is 4 girls of middling experience and actual talent,
teenage girls,
decide to steal a very expensive book off of the Titanic, heist style. The thing about a heist movie is ideally the people you're getting should be the best of the best, right? Ideally the thing you're stealing should last you more than a year of profit, especially if you have to split it 4 ways, and in the end it only gets split 2 ways if we got there. And you have to feel confident in the characters. There's certain beats, and Will is going to talk about this, that a heist movie should hit. That certain things that are supposed to happen. This does not do it. It becomes more of a character study of the relationship between the girls, and the heist ended up taking a huge backseat in some places, and yet none of their relationships are fully developed enough to make that part the engaging part of the story. Horsifa is cocky. She's always in a weirdly good mood. Halfway through the book, you're like, oh, it wasn't just about stealing this book. It's about getting revenge on this guy super disproportionately because he was your friend and then he got you arrested, but nothing actually bad happened to your life as an outcome of you getting arrested.
She almost feels weirdly like a manic pixie girl, Horsifer to me did.
That's exactly. She feels like a manic pixie dream girl who decided stealing was her hobby.
Okay, so I did do actually some research back a week ago. I don't remember how much of it is now. Looking at Horsifer is literally the worst. She's I did not like her as a main character, and her romance is maybe one of the most boring romances I've read ever. I looked at some of the tropes and some articles and some guy who actually did like a study of different heist movies to figure out like what the tropes were and which ones were effective. And the thing is that this is a heist book, but it is not structured like one, and there is something inherently unsatisfying in that. Some people are going to make the argument that like, oh, it doesn't have to be a good heist, but it actually does, because it is otherwise lacking in structure. This is not a romance book that like has a heist at the last minute and you're like, oh, okay, but it functions as like a romance structure with the correct beats. No, this just is just lacking any structure. This takes place on the Titanic, so we expect certain things from this story. If you don't want us to expect Titanic things from it, don't put it on the Titanic. That is going to become a problem in this book because it could have just been put anywhere. But if you don't want this to have the expectation of a good heist, don't make it a heist. The thing with a heist is that the reason we like heist stories is that we like to see how smart the characters are. We like to see the intricacies of what is making the clock tick. How are they going to get past these really difficult things with the tools provided? What role does each person have, even if it is something as simple as hiding in a box, Ocean's 11 style? We want to see the characters being smart. A lot of times, too, that means having a smart villain who can do like cat and mouse back and forth. Like that's often... dear listeners, Maria's peeing.
Sorry, I'll mute it.
She was not peeing. She was putting tea in her cup. So like for example, the villain in this is incredibly dumb and weak. That doesn't make for an interesting heist.
I forgot there was a villain. You were like the villain, and I was like, there was a villain?
I've talked before about how writers need to stop writing politics because they're not good at it, and it's a much harder thing to write than like action adventure. Heist is hard to write. Like it is. It's hard to make good. A mediocre heist book is not as fun as a mediocre action adventure book. And this is below even mediocre heist book. And so we'll talk more as we go through it about which beats didn't work and which elements didn't work.
Overall, this book, like I said, terrible main character syndrome. I do want to Angry Otter put a really great example of Horsifer's sentence for being the worst. Corpsicle never recovered from the Atlantic Ocean.
That would have been nice.
She makes a comment like that.
Magical Girl Shauna says, it sounds like Jaigirdar, sorry, wanted to write a heist book without ever having read a heist book. It is weirdly like that. And the other thing is, some book reviewer was talking about how they had read Six of Crows before this, and Six of Crows is a much better heist book. I haven't read it, but I'm sure we will at some point. And like, I actually haven't read any heist books. I only really have like heist movies and the zeitgeist of what I understand about it. But like, there is a way to write a heist book, and it doesn't sound like she even tried.
Also, Lindbergh makes the very valid point. 4 girls of mixed heritage steal the Rubaiyat on the Titanic in 1912. Hell yeah, the heist needs to be good. It does. And then Angry Otter also says, August, weak misogynist tea. It's so weak. It's not even like good misogynist tea.
Mr. Misogyny hardly qualifies as a villain,
Qualifies as a
even
villain.
if Triol is weak.
I honestly kind of felt bad for him at a certain point.
Yes, a lot.
He felt like someone who had been raised in a society and who like made terrible decisions. But then like his entire life was going to be ruined.
It felt like to me like he made one bad decision and then the book like crucified for like I literally kept expecting there to be some kind of reason he had betrayed the main character that they were going to figure out.
Besides, you don't want to be my girlfriend.
Yeah, that was so weird. Also, honestly, the romance in this is so bad that I actually ship him and Horsifer and being corpsicles in the ocean together more than I do the main characters.
And honestly, like I shipped Emily and Violet more than Horsifer, and
it's hard because I wanted Emily to get hit by a train a lot. I hated Emily so much as a character. She was just so like soft all the time. Like I don't even necessarily know how to describe it. There was something just like very bleh about her as a character. And I should say that it was cool. I thought that several of the girls were of mixed heritage on the Titanic at that time period. I thought that was going to be interesting. It isn't at all.
Yeah, they never deal with like onboard racism.
Nothing.
Where was the onboard? You know how sometimes it's like you're trying to shove something in that doesn't feel organic to the story? In this case, it would have been a really great place to have a commentary, especially for Emily, who was raised wealthy and privileged, but is half black, on the Titanic. And the author even notes at the end, she has a little thing about how they suspect there was only one black family on the Titanic. And while there were, like she said, like there probably were not a ton of colored people on the ship.
Because they have the manifest. Like they know pretty much who was on there and who wasn't. And so like that would have been interesting to talk about. Not explored. Would it make more sense if Emily fell off the ship and was like into the Republic? You know what, Lindbergh? Maybe this is the rewrite session, and that's how we end the book.
Angry Otter says, also, why did Violet hate Emily so much for being a rich girl, but not Horsifer?
I kept thinking that was going to be a reveal, that she hadn't known that Horsifer was, but I guess she did the whole time?
Also, Violet hates Emily because she's not an outsider. She hasn't had to live it rough like them. She was a obviously half black woman in Ireland and previously Paris in 1912. What are you talking about, Violet? Just because she happens to have money, like she's living in the same fucking boarding houses you. She's obviously not doing great. Like it's like the book decided at moments to just ignore racism.
Especially having just read a lot of Tamer. Oh god, I love Novik. But like there is a lot of like understanding of like the subtle racism that happens there, and like none of that is in this book at all. And I get maybe that the author wanted to do like wish fulfillment. You know how like it's like the Bridgerton thing. Sometimes people just want to have the aesthetics of a thing, but that doesn't really work here because the rest of the book is so bad that it doesn't feel real. It just feels out of place.
Bridgerton does the really dumb thing where they try to be like, oh, and then the king fell in love
Oh
with a
god.
black woman and racism's not there. Now, they could have just done it colorblind, but the
Mhm.
reason it works is because there are rich, wealthy families of color plus white, wealthy families of color, and everybody's treating each other the same. So you can just be like, in this invented alternate history, it's just like it's fine. But then they tried to like sneak in actual commentary, and that's what fucked up Bridgerton. Where in this, like, Emily acknowledges that because she's mixed, her life has been harder. You as a reader never fucking see that, and none of the other characters fucking acknowledge that. You hear from Hannah more of dealing with that kind of stuff than you do from Emily.
So the four main characters like put on cool heist music, but also don't, as I explain this, because the book does the least fun, like classic heist movie is the cool introduction of each of the characters doing a cool thing that they're good at, that they're gonna. Yes, Maria's cat is extremely cute, audio listeners. One of the best parts of the heist movie is the introducing of the characters. Not done here, but we have four. We have Horsifer, who is magic pixie stealing dream girl, who was from a rich family at some point, and then didn't want to be part of it because she was like lesbian, but also nobody else in the book seems to really have that much homophobia, so apparently it was just her parents.
Never mentioned.
She fell in with a guy called August, we find out halfway through the book. August was a really cool dude who took care of her and taught her a lot of things, but also he kind of wrote a book of poetry about how he had a crush on her, and when she was like, he then got her caught by the police, and she has never forgiven him for it.
If you ever want to hear about lame motivations, her entire purpose of going on the Titanic, stealing a very expensive, one-of-a-kind artistic book is to fuck with August. Because their original plan of just casually stealing stuff...
That's not enough.
That's not enough. Like...
And again, the thing is, you meet August on screen and he just seems like a normal guy. And he's so happy when she like pretend forgives him. He's like, oh, it's okay. Like, you know, like I don't get what she was. There really is like a weird sexism feeling to it because otherwise it doesn't make sense how much the book thinks he's evil. Yeah, a girl with Emily's heritage, Lindbergh says, should have caused a huge stir among the passengers because they didn't travel third class. The other thing is, this is a heist. Having like, oh, maybe all the characters are looking at her as she makes her entrance, as then Violet picks the pockets a thing like that. That kind of what is it, like play of manners or something like that could have been a really interesting way of integrating heist elements, but it's not done because this author is a hack.
Angry Otter said, and the thing Violet and Emily bond over is Emily telling her how much it sucked being mixed, and Violet is like, OMG, I would have never thunk it, which is exactly how that scene plays. And also, I want you to know, Violet's other issue with Emily is she doesn't trust that Emily can be an expert forger of documents just because she's an artist. And after this conversation where Emily's like, actually, my life has been kind of hard after my dad died. There was no one to kind of protect me. Violet's like, I guess she's not too bad. And I guess she is talented. And it's like, your personal issues with her should not be resolved, but you have still not been proven wrong about questioning her ability to be an expert forger just because she does pretty landscapes. That's not how art works.
Lindbergh says, Josepha, the vicious, privileged klepto.
Your reading today is... You're struggling.
Do you see how Marie's being a little ableist right now? And actually, usually you would try to cover for a co-host and be nice and be like, oh, I got this. Like when Maria is doing racist things, I always cut that out of the video. But here she is throwing me under the bus. Can you guys believe this? This is why these live streams are tough. Lindbergh says, Violet, angry Polish mama bear. Hina, cute circus goddess. Emily, I draw things and miss my dad. Yeah, that actually does break it down. Hina is a circus performer who basically has the skill set of a ninja because people seem to think that being an acrobat means you're essentially just a circus ninja. She was Indian. Her family didn't like her because she was fat, and she also talked to like a boy who was lower class. So
No,
now
she
she's
was
in England.
shapely. Her body had developed too soon. It wasn't because she was fat.
That's Hannah. Emily was her father was a painter. She was French upper class, but of a Haitian mother, and her father died, and so now she doesn't paint things and just feels sad, but still has like some money. Violet was Polish. She has a younger brother she wants to take care of back in the old country, so she needs some money to finally make it work.
In the old country.
That's really what it is. I kind of liked the idea of Violet because there is a lot of like racism, but not racism that happens to Eastern European and different ethnic groups within Europe that people don't think of as being race issues because so much of our narrative nowadays is on race as it's understood in colonial empires. So I thought that would have been interesting to explore more about like how Polish people really were a lower class then, and even like now to a certain extent. I think there's some immigration issues here and there. I'm not positive. I'm not British. Thank God. Violet is the only one I halfway liked because the narrator did a bitchy voice for her that sounded very cultured, and I was like, oh. Violet's thing is that she can like she's a really great actress, right? And she's really pretty, so like she can be like the face, while like Horsifer can be like the mind. And that would have been interesting, but it's not. There's so many action sequences in this book that are so boring. I'm remembering them getting onto the boat. Okay, so apparently the author is quite liked because she did some sapphic romances. But doing a contemporary sapphic romance about two girls who have rival henna businesses, as the plot of one of her previous books is so much easier to write than Titanic Heist.
It's so much easier, I would imagine. And that's Max. It really is a bad A-team.
It's so bad.
Because again, as Will said, Hannah, a trapeze artist, and she can like walk across a tightrope, and then you find out she's been doing judo for years, and that she's also like has the ability to squeeze into, which is something, because here's the thing, contortionists and trapeze artists, not the same thing dost make. Partially because trapeze artists have to have so much goddamn muscle.
Also, she can walk silent because again, that's like she's a ninja. Also, the thing with the vents in the ship, like I was like, did the author play too many video games? Like that's a fun trope for Batman to go through the vents, but that doesn't really work in real life. Going through an air vent, it's so incredibly noisy. They make sound. They're basically just like large aluminum things that make noise as you go through. That was a bad description, guys. Pretend I said it smarter.
But no, you're 100% right, and it's just like the skills you need to be a contortionist are different skills than to be, because trapeze artists have to have a massive amount of muscle to do the things they do. And granted, yes, also flexibility, but it's a different skill set. And this book conflates skill sets to the point where anyone who is vaguely familiar with anything having to do with it, like again, Emily, fantastic artist, great landscapes. She can do a Helen portrait. Do you know she can also forge travel documents? That's not a skill people have to practice at.
And also make a legendary book from like 1,000 years before. Like, no, it's literally like being a painter is not the same as being a Xerox machine. Like the author seems to not really.
Also, did they have? Because the one thing they never said is that they had copies of travel documents for her to like mimic. They never made that point. Did she just have a working memory of what travel like it's just so
also
weird.
When they're trying to make a copy of the Rubaiyat later, like where do they get these fake rubies? Like that was my thing, is that the whole thing is they want to steal this text called the Rubaiyat, right? Which to begin with, like the book should have spent more time talking about like the ethical nature of stealing a great text versus just like some woman's jewels.
A one of a kind text.
Okay, so the Rubaiyat, I'm assuming, is some kind of, or I'm not assuming, it is some kind of a Middle Eastern text of poetry and full. That's very valued and culturally valued. And so I did think it would be an interesting idea if it was like that scene in the first part of Black Panther, where Killmonger is in the library looking, or in a museum looking at a British collection of African artifacts and being like, yeah, you stole these. These are ours, and you stole them. And that's a thing that happened in antiquity a lot. The British would just take things to their museums and be like, oh, we got it now, it's ours.
To this day.
And so I thought it would be kind of interesting if it was like 4 mixed race girls like taking back this cultural artifact that had been stolen by the British. It's like a nice anti-colonialist theme.
That would have been so cool, because not only do they want to take this beautiful one of a kind like book that is like it is a work of art in and of itself, they don't want to just steal it, they want to rip it apart for goods, which is just flippin' insane. Why on earth would you do that? And there's like Emily, whose like father really liked this poet's work, is like, guys, we can't do this. It's really shitty. But nobody else, everybody, and so it's not a message about, because again, this book could have commented on racism during this period, commented on colonialism and taking back, like, especially because you have so many characters of color. It could have been doing all of these things, and it doesn't. It feels like a white person's writing of what what being colored it would be like during this period, and being like, well, I didn't want to get bogged down in the race issues or the colonialism issues. Like, that's what, and the thing is, the author that's not what she was trying to do. So I'm just at a loss for how it happened, because she isn't. And like when I read her commentary at the end of the book, it was super thoughtful. She'd obviously done her research, and and she commented on how, like, on the actual Titanic there was only 2 female workers, so she specifically made the choice to have more female staff in the book. I thought it would have been really interesting if she would have made some of the staff colored, and then how they got Emily onto the ship, because she couldn't be a passenger, really, because they weren't rich enough to really, like, justify that, is maybe get her in as a servant, and that's what she, like.
Oh, you mean also interesting story details in terms of that maybe Emily her whole life has felt like her aristocratic breeding is the only thing that keeps her in her social class and as a person, and so to give that up to be part of the heist would be an internal conflict. Maria, why would you try to enrich the characters' inner lives? This is another problem that the book has, and we need to get to the plot at some point, but the book has this problem where every time a little bit of tension is mounting between like 2 different characters or something happening, the book is immediately like, no, don't worry, we're resolving that tension now, it's not going to go anywhere. If Hitchcock has that thing about, like, you should have don't have the bomb explode, have the bomb ticking under the table as people are playing cards, it creates tension. And this book is like, no, don't worry though, the bomb is not going to go off,
God forbid.
Instead, we're going to have a lot of scenes of these girls bonding and getting less tension filled, as nothing really happens with the actual heist plot.
Shrew just made a really fun comment. If you aren't going to go all in on the historical fiction of being on the Titanic, you should always go all out wacky. Don't steal from the Titanic, steal the Titanic. Bait and switch the boat.
I mean, that would be, I love that idea. That is brilliant.
That would have
been so funny. Okay, I'm going to try to hold back some of my other criticisms because I have more, and we describe a little bit more of the plot. The plot is actually not super interesting. Basically, Horsifer and Violet, they steal things a lot, and they live at a boarding place, and at the boarding place, there's Hina, the Indian acrobat, and she also, like, helps them steal stuff every time, but she's like, her thing is she's insecure. And then also at the boarding house is Emily, who doesn't do anything but be depressed, but Horsifer has been looking at her a whole bunch of times, and is suddenly like, hey, we're gonna get on the Titanic and steal a thing, do you want in? We need you to help forge documents as a human Xerox machine. And Emily is like, I kind of like her, I'm gonna do it.
It honestly felt like they didn't actually need Emily, but Horsifer was like, I need to invent a reason to get the girl I like on this ship, because otherwise I can never, because they've never spent, that's the thing is, they've never spent any time together. So again, Violet and Horsifer, best friends, they've interacted. Hina, they've interacted with. Emily, Horsifer and her have vaguely interacted and seen each other across a room. So imagine, you are a girl mourning the death of your father, trying to capture your artistic spark, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a girl named Horsifer comes up to you and is like, hey, you want to steal a really expensive one-of-a-kind piece of, like, work?
Cultural artifact?
Yeah, sell it, and do it all on the Titanic, which is leaving in 2 days. Also, can you forge documents? Like, bitch, I don't know you! We don't know each other. You have never seen me write. What if my handwriting is terrible? What if I'm an incredible artist, but my handwriting is shit?
Or like Feyre in Akatar, she's an impressionist. I still find that the funniest thing, that she knows what impressionism is. And the other thing is, this is framed later in the book, and this is why I say that Horsifer is kind of a manic pixie dream girl, because it's almost phrased like she saw how, framed as she saw how depressed Emily was and wanted to bring life back to her.
That's exactly how it works.
That's how they're the main pairing of the book, the main ship, if you would, outside of the Titanic.
And they're not the one that goes down with it. Cue that song. I will go down with this ship.
I'm sorry, guys. This episode is just going to be like that.
You can tell we're taking this so seriously today.
Back on track. Yes. Also, I hated their romance. There's a really bad case of fever touch, though in this case it's more like less sexy and more like feelings touch. Still hated it. It's a really bad case of it. I don't understand why they're attracted to each other at all. I very slightly shipped Horsifer and August insofar as I'm like, oh, I could see how that would have been a more interesting ship. But I think that because the author didn't write it, and so her shitty writing couldn't get into my imagination. Whereas I think if
she'd actually done it, it wouldn't have worked. Similarly, like, I thought Violet had sexual chemistry or had chemistry with everyone except for Horsifer. Like I shipped Violet and Hinna, and I shipped Violet and Emily. Like, that girl just had chemistry with people. And again, part of it is the author didn't actually write it, so I could just be like, oh, look at these two people bonding over things that are uncommon to both of them.
Right. Okay. So to Emily, she's like, hey, we're going to steal a thing. And Emily is literally like, I kind of like this girl. I'm going to do it. And by the way, usually when I describe things, it sounds overly perfunctory. Take a shot. And like kind of lacking in context. No, it's about like this in the book. The book is weirdly like perfunctory and lacking in context.
Yeah.
They're going to get on the ship. And again, because being a painter makes you a Xerox machine, Emily has gotten them a bunch of fake passports. But wait, she put the wrong date on them.
On one of them.
What are they gonna do? If you would think, oh no, this is like a thrilling moment where they have to like improvise and come up with a cool, exciting thing. No. For some reason, this is the most boring and pedestrian sequence I've ever read. Like, this author is so bad at action sequences and just tense moments. And they just steal it from another lady, and Violet acts haughty. And
literally, there just so happens to be a lady standing by holding her travel documents in her hands who happens to be passable enough like Violet to make it work, and they just immediately steal it. So number one, here's some issues I had with the beginning. How did she manage to know because she steals them all second class tickets. This means she had to steal 4 second class tickets. How the fuck? Because she had to do them on separate occasions. We have her stealing like the last one because it's 1 ticket. How did she know who had second class tickets or not? How did she know she wasn't going to get a 3rd class, a 1st class, a 2nd class? Like, in what world? How do you manage to steal? Unless it's from literally a family of 4 who paid for their second class tickets, 4 second class tickets on the Titanic that happen to be rooms next to each other. It's 2 rooms that they split. How did you do that?
Somebody, I can't remember because it was earlier in here. One of our lovely patrons. By the way, we have a Patreon. Join it. You get to be part of cool live streams and get to read awesome books like this. I promised the patrons that after this, we're going to not read YA books for a little bit. Yes, that the book should start with them all on the Titanic, looking like they're separate, but then you find out, oh no, they're all part of the same.
That would be such a good way. That's such a heist-ass thing to start a book. It's like in The Glass Onion. The book starts or the movie starts where you think 2 characters don't know each other, and then you find out after like a while later that no, they knew each other the whole time. This was a setup, and like that's so engaging because it puts the reader's expectations on their head. Like, it's so easy. That's such an easy starter fix.
It's a more technical start. One of the things I always remember about Jurassic Park when we read that is that opening where it's like you're not following one character, you're following an idea, like a hook of an idea across several different characters. Like, it was so like masterfully done. this would have required a little bit of that, and the author does not have the ability to do that.
Judo Shrew is serious shenanigans. Sorry, I didn't know that. I didn't know you were serious shenanigans either, Judo Shrew. Thank you for telling
I
us.
remember from
now
last
know.
time because I care about our patrons. It reminded me a lot. In describing what this book could do, it reminds me a lot of like a boxer where it's like, okay, you can't beat him with punching. You can't outlast him. Your footwork is terrible. It's like there's so few things this author can do. And like she doesn't have the skill to pull off a lot of the things this book fundamentally needs for you to be able to do. They're on the Titanic. There's this matron there who's like, I don't trust you guys, not because of your race, but because there's 4 women.
And you're all too young to be traveling unchaperoned without another adult or man person or old lady like myself to be taking care of you. So it literally is, she just is like, wow, you all are very young. And also, like, they literally stole from the matron of their boarding house a bunch of her clothing and stuff. Oh, Lindbergh says it's adult, I think.
Northwest Country said, oh, is this YA? I'd assume they were all grown adults. Maria has a thing where she talks about how she hates when teenagers are too competent in books. God, have I never felt that more than in this book. I was like, why are you all... Like, I actually think it would be fun to have a bunch of teens bumbling through a heist, like, earnestly trying to do things, but then also kind of fucking up at times, but also making it work in clever ways. No, I'm like, you're why are you all professional heist people who think that because you pick some pockets sometimes you can steal from the vault of the Titanic a massive cultural artifact? Like, it's like, what?
Parsifal was a petty thief. She didn't do any major, like, and her, because the thing is, you are told later that her and August did some larger heists together, and there was a thing where they were breaking into someone's house to steal. But again, nothing that you are shown is anything but above petty thievery. You know, there's nothing serious. They've never, like, she never went after a bank. She never, like, conned a man out of, like,
She doesn't do like
an
confidence
investment.
games.
Yeah, nothing.
So, Maria, important question. Do you have a producer voice for like a movie, like a board meeting producer type voice? Just do your old-timey voice. You know, the one you do where you're like, "Arr, arr." All right, and then say Aaron Houston's comment.
So you've got a Titanic YA retelling for me.
Yeah, perfect. That was a great comment. Yeah, it is. It does feel like that. Like she almost just put it on the Titanic because she thought that would sell better, which we're going to talk about how incredibly annoying that is towards the end of the book. Okay, the important thing to remember about this middle section of the book is that nothing interesting happens. There should be, at this point, there should be a scene, because this happens in every heist story, where they sit around the table and they're like, all right, guys, the music goes in there. Bing, 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 bing. You do music in the background, heist music. And then, okay, guys, here's the plan. We're going to go to the vault, and then here on the map, you're going to do this, and then Hina's going to do that, and then this is going to go there, and you're going to see all the different clockwork gears match up together. No. Now, I actually can't remember really what their plan was, and I think it was really simple.
They never really, like, give us a blow by blow, because there's literally a point where I realized that part of their plan had happened, but they never explained that was part of their plan. And so the plan was, they got on the ship. They can't actually do any, so their goals are find out where the Rubaiyat is. They know the man who has it, so they have to find out what room he's in. Learn the layout. Guys, they steal the floor plans of the Titanic, okay? A multi-level, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rooms. They're also, just because one of the architects of the Titanic is on the ship, they also managed to get a thing of all the ductwork on the Titanic. Hina manages to find the room that the guy who is the architect of the Titanic is in. She, like, squeezes in through, like, a vent on the top of his door. So I guess her head, this was a huge problem with me and Hina, is the author would describe a space that Hina had to fit through, and I'm sorry, human heads are large. Like, because to put your head sideways like this means your shoulders to get through are like this, and so, like, you're, like,
But then also at other points, the girls can also go through vents. Again, it's like the author played a game where it's like, oh, the side character goes through the vent to open the door for the other character, but because, like, Prince of Persia, or I think of the new God of War, does that as well.
The girls managed to steal the floor plans of the entire Titanic and make a one-page copy. Do you know what a one-page copy of every single floor, room, and detail of the Titanic would look like? A goddamn mess. It would be tiny, incomprehensible. Like, there would have been pages and pages, and each level of the Titanic would have had its own page of floor plans. Then you would have had a cross section of the Titanic cut in half of what it was supposed to be, and all. How the fuck did you? Oh, we stole the floor plans, and we were able to analyze them. And Hannah's got the entire thing memorized in her head. They've been on the ship for 2 days, 3 days. After day 2, Hannah's got the entire thing memorized. She knows the ship inside and out. I'm sorry, it just makes me so angry, guys. Anyway, so their plan: get the floor plan, find out where the Rubaiyat was being kept, which Violet has to do through, like, acting trickery. And then, once they know where it is, the plan was to just wait until right before everybody gets off the ship in New York to steal it, because they can't steal it beforehand, because then the guy would know it was stolen, and they're on a ship, so the odds of them getting caught is really high. So it was literally like last minute, which takes all the tension out of the book, because the Titanic is gonna sink. So their plan to steal it the last day of the voyage, from the start, is never gonna fucking happen. Okay? It's not gonna happen.
And honestly, that is why you're here for this book, because you're like, oh shit, it's gonna go wrong. You always know in a heist movie something's gonna go wrong. In this case, the ship is gonna sink. Fascinating. Such a cool idea of, like, they're still trying to steal it even as the ship is sinking.
That's what I thought was going to happen. I thought the ship was going to start sinking and they go, fuck it, let's get the Rubaiyat right now. And then they were going to have to play, like, put on coats and try trick the other people. Like, the 4 of them all are wearing the same outfit. And, like, the people, the guards and people, or the guy who actually had the Rubaiyat is going to be trying to get them. And then, like, they all go on 4 different lifeboats. And then, did they actually get it? And it's not till the end of the book that you realize they actually still got. No, they steal it before the ship starts sinking, because they're another part of their plan. So again, August, Horsifa's bud August, is working for the man who is selling the Rubaiyat. He's taking it to New York. There's a buyer there, right? And August has kind of turned his life around. He's been working for this guy. The implication is that he tells Horsifa is that he's still trying to con this guy, but then later you find out that no, he was actually really invested in this job, and it's him working like a legitimate job. And so Horsifa's plan, specifically why she chose the Rubaiyat, was she wanted to steal it and then frame August for it so he would get in trouble. Please note, when she got arrested all those years ago and he betrayed her, nothing happened. She was in jail for a night. She talked her way out of it, and they literally just released her back into the world. And there was no ramifications, long-term ramifications to her life, except that she lost her friend August, okay? What she's setting him up for is to be framed for the theft of a one-of-a-kind, incredibly expensive book from the man he was literally working for. So ruining his job, he would get sent to jail, not even just arrested and then released. Like, she is planning life ruining shit. Oh yeah, Icewell says they didn't even have a buyer yet. They were just transporting it and hoping someone in New York might buy it. Miss Allie Snow goes, God, did this book just not have any kind of dev editor? I don't know.
I don't think so. It's insane that this book got. I really do think someone in the publishing industry was just like, hey, it's going to be the anniversary of the Titanic in like a year or two. Do you think you can take whatever book you were writing and put it on the Titanic? We'll pay you a lot of money. And the author was like, bet.
She's pretending she doesn't know who August is. Violet is like, why are you being really cagey? And who is this August guy? You never mentioned him, but he like seems super focused, and like, why? Like, Violet immediately picks up that there's something that Horsifa is not telling them. But their plan is to. So Horsey just is a vengeful bitch. Yes. Allie. She just a vengeful bitch. Horsifa's specific plan that the rest aren't fully aware of is to make August think that they've forgiven each other, that she's forgiven him, have him show her the book, which I don't understand why he would do this. So he
Mhm.
knows, he sees Horsifa on this ship, and he knows she is up to something. Okay. His initial plan is like, are you trying to do something? But then when she's like, no, we're fine. We're cool. I have no problem with you anymore. We're just totally chill. He's like, oh, let me show you the super amazing book that me and my employer are transporting. It's incredible. I'll bring it to you. I will take this one of a kind, super expensive, just because we used to be friends a couple years ago, and I had a crush on you, and then I betrayed you and got you arrested.
It's almost kind of pathetic and sad, and like it
Yes.
made me feel for him that he was so happy Horsifer had like forgiven
Forgiven
him.
him, that he
Yeah.
was like, let me show you. So he brings the Rubaiyat to her, okay? And the plan that her and the rest of them spoke about, but it doesn't tell you before this point, is to pretend that she rips a page of the Rubaiyat, so that he thinks he's going to be in trouble, and he now needs to hide the Rubaiyat from his employer as much as possible, so that his employer doesn't realize that that because of him the Rubaiyat got ruined before they even got to America. And they do this, but they don't actually, like, Horsifa didn't actually rip the Rubaiyat. They just forged a page and then made it look like it got ripped, which again, the book doesn't tell you. It wasn't until much afterwards where I was like, oh,
Uh-huh.
that's what happened there. Anyway, so they do that, which is again but they did it so soon, it made no sense in the term, because they all know that every night the employer looks at the Rubaiyat. So why would they do this several days beforehand? It would make sense if they were going to plan to do it the night that like the night before they get into New York, so that he would try hide it from his employer, and thus that would give them a chance to steal it, and they wouldn't know until they got off the Titanic, which makes sense, which again makes why they did it 3 nights in to the fucking voyage no fucking sense. Absolutely. And because like the author had to do it that way to get that plot point done before the ship sunk. Oh, they get caught by the matron on the boat, Matron Wallace. She God, there's this really dumb plot line where Emily has a hair clip, right? And she loses it. And instead of immediately going to Matron Wallace, who's the matron of the second class, and going, hey, I lost a really beautiful blue hair clip that I had when I came on the ship. In case anybody finds it, can you please return it to me? Here's what it looks like. I'm an artist. I can literally draw you a picture of it. Instead of doing that, they don't tell anyone. And then Horsifa, a while later, sees the hair clip in Matron Wallace's hair. Evidently, lost and founds didn't exist. Customer service was not something the Titanic did, because I would never just find a beautiful hair clip, especially on the second class, because like second class has some money, I would
Mhm.
not just be like, this mine now. Ice Willow says, how did Matron Wallace even get the hair clip? The implication is she just fucking found it and decided it was hers. That's the implication the book gives you. So Matron Wallace finds a hair clip that she knows is not hers.
Okay, you guys know Downton Abbey, right?
Yes.
Downton Abbey takes place at the same time. The servants, every night, the main servant would count the silver utensils as they were put back into the locker to make sure that none of the servants were stealing it.
Yep.
There is no way she finds a hair clip and is like, I'ma just keep it and I'm gonna wear it on top of that. No. No.
Instead of being like, hey, anyone on the second, in second class, has anyone lost something? And then people can come and be like, these are the things I've lost. And again, it makes no sense that Emily wouldn't just go to the woman who has already said, I'm going to be in charge of you ladies. If there are any issues, come to me, and not go, hey, I lost my hair clip. But anyway, none of that happens. Matron Wallace finds the hair clip, decides it's fucking hers, and puts it in her hair. Emily's real upset. It's one of the last things her dad gave her. And again, mourning Papa's death.
Lindbergh says, these plot holes are larger than the rent that the iceberg left in the Titanic. Guys, the Titanic was designed to be able to lose 4 of the holds underneath and have those go under and still be able to not sink. This book ain't no Titanic.
Matron Wallace finds it, she puts it in her hair. As Horsifa's doing things at some point, she sees the hair clip in Matron Wallace's hair. And instead of being like, hey, my friend lost that hair clip, did you find it? Like, you can ask her about, like, we can both go right now and ask her about it, and she can describe it to you and you can hide it. Like, instead of doing any of that a normal fucking person would do, she decides to steal it out of Matron Wallace's hair. Okay? Steals it out of Matron Wallace's hair. She thinks everything is good. Matron Wallace then makes the assumption that because she saw Horsifa amongst the crowd of people right before the hair clip got stolen, just assumes that Horsifa stole the clip, comes into their rooms one night, and again, all of their plans, a copy of the Rubaiyat, the floor plans that they stole of the Titanic is everywhere, comes in and sees all of this stuff and immediately goes, oh, these girls are not here to just travel. They're obviously doing things and being a menace to society, and goes to just like lock them up for the remainder of the voyage.
It's hilarious though, because this scene is her. I'm not. This is how the visual image I got was that she's looking through their luggage, and slowly the girls just kind of look at each other, and they all just kind of like walk away, and that's how they escape Matron Wallace.
They literally just walk out.
Yeah, they just kind of slowly walk out.
And then they have to they decide they're gonna. This is the moment because now Matron Wallace knows that they were here to steal something. She doesn't know exactly what, so they decide, no, this is the moment. 3 days into this journey, or they need to steal the Rubaiyat now. Thank God they already had ripped the page of the Rubaiyat previously, which made no sense, to enable August to want to hide it from his employer for this convenient needing to steal it right now moment. They go steal it. Hinna is they're like, Hinna, you gotta do this. And Hinna at first is like, now this is kind of a dumb idea, guys. I say we just lay low and just figure, no, this is what we must do. Hinna has to go through the ducts, and she drops down into the guy who has the Rubaiyat's room. She hangs out of, because there's a point where he's putting it in or opening the safe, and she has to hang out of she has to literally lower her torso through so that she can watch him with a mirror undo the lock on the safe, and nobody heard her. Again, like Will said, vents are loud.
And she's not a ninja.
So she hangs out, and then she pulls herself back in with this girl's core, which, now granted, being a trapeze artist, your core has to be incredibly strong. So she pulls herself in, core only, back in, and then once they leave, she drops down. Unfortunately, once she's made that drop, there's nothing. She couldn't move the bed. There was no chair. They were in a first-class cabin. How did they not have a chair so you could get up? The ceilings couldn't have been that high that she could have not. I'm getting ahead of myself. So she drops in. She breaks into the safe. She gets the Rubaiyat. Yay! Then she realizes the door's locked. Previously, once they got into a locked room, they were able to get out of it because it didn't lock from the inside. Then in this first-class cabin, and again, the other one she broke into was also a first-class cabin. So when she broke in, she got the floor plans. With that one, she was able to break in through the vent above it's not even a vent. It was a little air flow thing just on the top of the door. She was able to squeeze in through that, and she didn't have to squeeze back out through that. She just was able to get all the stuff, open the door, and walk out, and then lock it behind her. But in this other first-class cabin that she was in, you need a key to unlock it from the inside. And this isn't explained that, some people's rooms just did that. All of a sudden, now it locks from the inside and she can't get out. And the vent on the ceiling is much too high. And despite the fact that this is a first-class cabin, and I guarantee you there's a desk and a bed. Now, maybe the desk was, nailed to the ground, but the chair, one would have to assume, is not, because you have to move a chair to be able to sit at a desk. And how tall were these ceilings that standing on a chair she couldn't jump, because again, you've been told this girl is a ninja. So if you have a chair underneath the vent and you just jump up and grab, pull yourself through, I don't understand how this became such an issue. Shove the thing into your bodice and get the fuck up there, my girl. But no, she's trapped back in the hidey hole, because the girls had to run and hide, and they're hiding in the mailroom. In the mailroom, the girls were like, Hinna should have been back by now. What has happened? Why isn't Hinna back? So then they decide to go find her. They find her. They get into the door, but then the August and his employer are coming back. So then they have to get into the room and be in the room, even though they literally heard them coming down the hall. And then in the time it takes them to come down the hall and get into the room, they manage. Hinna opens the porthole window on the Titanic. She gets out. She uses a sheet to tie herself to an upper floor thing so that they can get in, or to another thing so that they can get to the next room over and get in through that porthole. Okay? And she's able to get all three girls out and before the door opens. Okay? You heard them. If you could hear them coming down the hall, they should have been at the door in 20 seconds. There's no way you could have accomplished that whole getting yourself out, tying the thing, then one at a time getting the girls out, and then getting yourself out on the side of the fucking Titanic in 20 to 30 fucking seconds.
Miss Allie Snow says, "Who knew the Titanic had Jeffrey's
tubes?
For those of you who are Philistines and don't know, Jeffrey's tubes is a reference to Star Trek. Educate yourself. And then Angry Otter says the author's sense of space was non-existent. This is actually a problem throughout the book in that the sense of where they are is extremely vague. Like you would think like so many rich details to the Titanic. No, and it's also hard to tell where things are sometimes.
That's something we haven't even had a chance to complain about. This book has no atmosphere. There's no description. Listen, the Titanic, the movie, because I don't super love that movie. I went through a stage of hating it. But it's so rich in details. They did their fucking research. It feels, now granted, they have the benefit of visual media to give it to you. But, like, how do you write a book with zero fucking atmosphere on the Titanic? There is something so magical about a boat that was called the Unsinkable Ship that was made at the height of technology, the height of luxury, that sinks on its maiden voyage, and you made me feel like I was in a mall. A multi-story mall.
There's so few sensory details to this book. And so Lindbergh mentions, like the time a couple are facing Hannah but can't see her, you mean? There's a problem in this book where the author seems to forget what's going on spatially around the characters, and so you as the reader are very unclear about what's going on, and it makes the whole thing feel very floaty and just unreal.
Prior to all of this stuff happening, like after they get caught by Wallace, before they actually try get the Rubaiyat, when they're in the room before they have to jump out, they feel the ship shake. Okay? And as they look out, Hannah goes, "Wow, it looks a little weird out here. I wonder what's happening. That's so strange." But they go into the room next door. They end up escaping. People are chasing them for a while.
So what happens is that at this point, like, they start being like, the ship feels weird and people are rushing around everywhere. That's odd. All right, step back. Talking about Titanic the movie. Titanic the movie to me is weird because it is one half manic pixie dream boy and rich bitch, and that part is melodramatic and not very good. And then one half tragedy, and that part is really good. And the fact that two never quite match is a really weird thing. Like you have this dumb part with like Leonardo DiCaprio being like chased through the ship by a guy with weird eyebrows on a gun, and then like you also have scenes of like the musicians on the deck of the Titanic,
that family laying in bed together. Yeah,
that movie is so fucking harrowing at points where you just feel the tragedy of it and the sense that like there are not enough lifeboats. Some of us are going to die in the water. You know, one thing is to think you're a good person. Another thing is to look at the lifeboat and go, I'm not going to get on it. I'm going to die. Like that, even just talking about it brings a sense of like horror, right? And that's one of the things that the movie does really well. Not this fucking book. This fucking book has none of that. None of that is in this book. And so when they get hit, and it's about to like an hour till the end of the book. I mean, 2 hours, I guess, because I read at double speed. Yeah. It's so late. None of that tragedy comes through. They also are just kind of like puzzled by what's going on. This is also a point where the fact that you have 4 viewpoints should have been used here. You can see what's happening all around the boat. There should have been somebody who like was on the deck when it happened. And then you have Emily downstairs being like, that's weird, but I don't get it. Like, what's the big deal? Like that should have been, and also in general, the characters should have been spread out more, each trying to do their job as the others go around. Like that is how a good heist movie works. And the heist actually taking longer would have been, I don't want to say to the betterment of the book, because again, you're dealing with like a boxer who can't punch or block or have footwork, or like this author is just like blundering around, knocking her head against the other boxer, pretty much, if you want a visualization.
But yeah, anyway, so...
No. Angry Otter said, have you guys mentioned
Emily locked in the matron's room? I'm about to get to that.
She just hangs out there.
Yeah, for a very long time. So this thing happens where they get the book, and then everybody's chasing them because August tells his employer, even though they leave. So I want you to know, Josefa's great plan for her revenge against August was to steal the actual Rubaiyat and leave a journal from August detailing his own plans to steal the Rubaiyat, and that was how she was going to get him caught.
So
but who's that big of an idiot to leave, like, at least leave a subtle calling card? But anyway, but even despite that, August is able to be like, hey, it was these 4 girls. Matron Wallace is already like, those are the girls that stole my hair clip, and I found plans in their room. So August doesn't get in trouble. He is just now trying to find Horsifa because he's super fucking pissed, and his boss fired him for why, I don't know. And now the guards are chasing them. And they manage to get Emily. Like, August gets Emily and threatens her with a gun. And they were like, she was like, leave, he won't actually hurt me, don't worry, but he'll hurt you, Horsifa. You gotta get somewhere safe with the Rubaiyat. So they abandon Emily. She is left with August, who eventually gives her to Matron Wallace, who locks her in a room. And she's sitting there like, wow, this is weird. And then she realizes, she's like the first person to realize the ship is sinking somehow, because she hears like a bunch of stuff, and then she was like, oh no, because she now also knows the ship's floor plan well enough, because she was going to paint a picture of it. I don't know why painting a picture of the outside of the ship would need you to know what the inside of the ship looked like, or where the floors where you could fill up with water were.
Maria. If you're drawing a portrait, you obviously need an MRI first. Has this never happened to you when you want a portrait or a selfie? You're like, okay, I'm gonna take a selfie, but I need the MRI first. And okay, that's
the skeletal structure.
The skeletal structure underneath, maybe like one of those things where they peel away the skin to show the muscle. That's how that works.
She's like banging on the door, and she's like, Matron Wallace, the ship is sinking. And Matron Wallace is like, are you fucking dumb? The ship is unsinkable. And she shows her the 1-page copy of the ship's floor plans and is like, look, and Matron Wallace is like, you're dumb. And then immediately water starts coming through the floor, but apparently not just outside the room where Matron Wallace is. So you have Horsifa running with the book. You have Violet and Henna, who were hiding out, and then they start having eventually they run into August again, so they're running away from August, and they're running down. They keep running down. Okay, but people are running past them. And then eventually they realize no guards are actually looking for them anymore at all. But August is still chasing after them. And so they keep running down. And then at some point, because people keep running past them, they're like, what's happening? And they're like, the ship's sinking. Water's coming up through the lower floors. And they go, well, I guess we'll just keep running down anyway, because we have to lose August. So they run down. They just keep going down, 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 down. They hit water and then go, oh no, we have to run up.
This is the most that the actual Titanic sinking is incorporated into the plot, by the way. Like, in terms of like the action or what's going on, like so little of this book actually is about the Titanic part of it. Lindbergh says, I don't understand how you can write a story on the Titanic and completely miss out on the terror. If you don't want profound existential terror in your YA book, don't place it on the Titanic. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I can't even really help Maria out with this part because I just genuinely do not remember pretty much anything until the epilogue from this part of the book. There's something with August that happens that I still think I'm misremembering because it's so stupid.
Henna and Violet realize they can't go down anymore, even though they were told that the ship was fucking sinking and there was water coming up. So they start going back up. Horsifa is now looking for them. The 3 of them end up finding each other on the top deck. Oh no, my AirPods are gonna die soon. I'm gonna have to do the thing where I have to. Oh god, I have to. They're dying. Okay.
Dear listeners, I feel like you should understand that Maria now looks like she's on the phone while she's doing this podcast. If you just skip to this part in the video, that's what's going on. Join our Patreon so we can afford real equipment.
Yay! Thank you. They get Horsifa.
You look like you're talking gossip into the phone. Horsifa did this.
Yeah, so Horsifa realizes I need to make sure to look at the camera. My go-to when I have my phone in is to look off to the side, but I need to actually look at the camera, I guess. But anyway, so Horsifa has the Rubaiyat. She had been running around, but she realizes nobody's chasing after her. She finds out the ship's sinking, so she goes up to the deck. So because she figures everyone will eventually just head to the deck, so her best chance of finding Emily, Violet, Henna is to go to the deck. She ends up finding Violet and Henna. How? There are hundreds of fucking thousands of people on this boat. How the fuck does she find them? I don't fucking know. But anyway, she finds them. and they're trying to get on a lifeboat, but they can't find Emily. So her plan was to put Violet and Hina on a lifeboat, and then she was going to run off and try find Emily because they abandoned her and left her down there. None of the girls get on the lifeboat. They all get out of the lifeboat because they're also now going to, which is the thing that makes me the most angry. Of the 4 girls, the 2 I would have most liked to survive were Hina and Violet, so that they could go live with Marco and be a nice little happy family, because that was kind of cute.
Mm-hmm.
No, they get out of the lifeboat and they decide to go help her find Emily. Emily, meanwhile, locked underneath. Matron Wallace comes back, realizes, oh shit, you were right, even though, like, again, the water started coming up through the floor immediately after Matron Wallace left. Releases her and was like, we need to get out of here. Let's get out of here. They come up to the top. As they come up on the top, there's a whole, like, interaction with August. And so Violet and Hina get separated from Horsifa because Violet sees, sorry, my ears itchy. Violet sees a boy that looks like Marco, and he's crying, and he's lost. And so instead of getting on the lifeboat immediately while there were still seats, she goes and she finds this boy, and they were like, why? She's like, why aren't you on a lifeboat? What's happening? And he's like, they said only women. I'm not a girl. And it's like, it's women and children. Everybody fucking knows this. Why would a, like, 10-year-old boy, like, no, you're too large. Like, he was small enough that she could, like, carry him, and once she put a coat and a hat on him, be like, this is my little sister, please take her. And they, like, took her, like, what the fuck? Who is leaving a young boy just out in the world? Like, anyway, but because of that, there's no longer room on any of the lifeboats. Heckin' terrible times.
Should there be an impactful moment? The fact that Violet decides, you know what? I'm going to give up the only family my brother has because this other boy needs to live in this moment, or something like that. Like, that is an interesting conflict for her as a character, because so much of her is defined by her love for her brother. Mm-hmm. The terror of, again, like, I'm going to die if I do this. We all like to think we're moral people, but that moment of panic of, like, but there's no other way out of this. Fascinating, cool. None of it in the fucking book, and it does not feel like that at all. Just describing that to you, it has more emotional impact than it actually has in the book.
In the book. It's insane. Anyway, so they don't get on it. They can't find Emily and Horsifa, but Emily gets on a lifeboat. Like, she doesn't find Horsifa there. Horsifa ends up, like, so Horsifa, Hina, and Violet are on the boat during the part where there's no more lifeboats. Shit's going down. And you're like, wow, Emily was the girl who was locked in a room for the longest amount of time is the one who got off the fucking ship? Insane. Who would have thought? But anyway, Horsifa manages to, as the ship's going down, see an overturned lifeboat that she's able to get to. And then there's a scene with Hina and Violet on the ship as it's, like, beginning to tilt up, and they're holding on to something. Like, Hina's holding on to something, Violet's holding on to Hina, and they're talking about what their plans are for life, you know? And they get to a point where they realize they're going to die. The 2 of them are going to die. And how I'm about to describe you, I want you to know, is going to be way more impactful and emotional than the way the book actually sells it.
And even going to be more impactful with her on the phone, which is inherently silly.
They're holding on for dear life, and they're talking about what their life would look like. And Hannah's like, listen, Marco loved you. Marco knows you loved him. He knows. We all knew, like, because Violet thinks of herself as having abandoned her family, abandoning her brother. And eventually Violet's like, Hannah, let go, because they know they're going to die. So their only option is to get it over quick. And the quickest way is hypothermia in the water. Listen, at that point, I would have found something. And I'm sure there are quicker ways. Anyway, and then their scene ends. Hannah lets go, and they both just fall. And I was like, are they gonna die? Like, because I didn't think this author had it in her to kill off half of the cast.
It's also a problem that I've seen happen a couple of times, where, like, the character's death looks like it's going to be reversed later, so it actually doesn't have any impact. So I didn't really feel any impact when they fell into the water, because I'm like, oh, they're going to They're going to be reunited later. It's going to be like, oh, but you made it
Yeah.
out alive. So like by the time you realize, oh no, they're dead, it doesn't have an impact. It's a
Yeah.
problem the story has.
That's exactly how it happened for me. I had the same thing where I was like, nah, they're going to be fine. Lindbergh also says, I'm just baffled there was never any sense of urgency in getting to the lifeboats. Did these girls even want to live? Did they? Like it's just so bizarre, guys.
And there's so many more interesting ways that Violet's thing with her brother and wanting to live versus wanting another child to live could have played out in an interesting way. And there's supposed to be this stuff about how Violet and Hina are family now, and Hina's never felt family, so at least she dies feeling like she's not alone. Again, just thinking of that idea is more impactful than it is in the book. Okay, so I should probably try to explain why it's so unimpactful in a lot of ways. And what it is, because often my mother complains that I'm not concrete enough with examples. Shut up, mom. The thing about it is that the book does an extremely poor job of creating atmosphere because there's very few descriptions of what's going on in the world. It's very bad at the characters' inner lives because they tend to be very simplistic and there isn't a lot of tension. Again, the author every time oh no, Emily and Violet don't get along and Emily screwed up a thing, so Violet thinks she's bad, but then they go to talk to the beep 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 guy and she figures out that Emily is black and maybe that's not great in 19th century of France. Now they're friends. Like every time there's tension, the author just goes boop, out. And so they're not very complex. They don't feel very alive. And so this moment doesn't really have the impact of building up until that point. It's a series of cascading failures in writing that make it so that when you do get there, it doesn't have an impact. And this is just one of the reasons we complain about things that are seemingly small a lot of times is because those build up to be, a cascade failure down the line. The other thing is that I've often complained about how Naomi Novik does this thing where her characters sit around and think too much. And in her case, it works because she's a really good writer. But in this case, and it's generally referred to as interiority in terms of the characters, these characters, like Violet doesn't really have a moment where she thinks through, like, I need to save this child. And it's also okay, she doesn't think through it in that way where you really feel like this is a sacrifice for her because she just kind of does it. And it's not like another great example of this, Nona the Ninth. Nona, but what's his name?
Noodle.
What's Noodle is in the back of the car.
Noodle.
Simple scene, no Nona thinking about it, but it snaps into place so many things throughout the book of how Nona thinks about life and the themes of life and death in that book. Violet saving a child is not the same moment. It's not where she suddenly realizes, like, maybe she's been throughout the whole book selfish about her brother versus other people. All the things she does, she's she screws people over, but it's because of her brother. And in this moment, she realizes my brother will be okay, where this child will die. It's a moment where it all snaps into focus for her. That doesn't happen here. That's why these moments don't hit. The author has not put in the work to make it work. And also, she just isn't really smart enough to think of some of these smarter concepts. And by the way, guys, quick tip. Don't get drunk if you're in the cold. That actually makes it, like, the alcohol will make the symptoms of cold be worse, except if you get extremely drunk. And then you can be dropped into water that would normally kill you, and you won't. Because what it does is it suppresses your mammalian shiver sense. This is a thing that's known. One of the guys who survived the Titanic survived because he just got incredibly drunk beforehand, and his body essentially was like, we're not going to kill ourselves because it's cold, but we're just going to chill in the water and almost like
Stasis.
Funnily enough, my mom read me an article about that when I was about 6. What up? Homeschooled. Hina and Violet's death is not the culmination of a bunch of character themes that could have been interesting. It has no impact because, again, you're like, they're going to come back. And then the book cuts. Like, Emily is on a boat.
At a dock, like, she survives.
Literally, it's like there's a scene break, and then they're like, and then a couple weeks later, they met on another boat. And you're like, that was bizarre. Again, there's a lack of, like, sitting and thinking about the impact of the moment, or sitting in there thinking about life, or maybe being like, I almost died, and now I wanted to die because my father died, but now I want to live. There's this interesting movie, and I cannot remember what it's called. There's like 4 astronauts on a ship, and the world dies. So they're the last remaining humans, and there's a sense of deep despair in that moment, and it's all like, why don't we just kill ourselves? And then some actiony things happen, and only 2 characters are left, and one of them, and they're separated from like a vast distance from each other, and they work to try to get back to each other, and by the end of the movie they get back together, and it actually feels happy. And you're like, oh, that feeling from despair earlier has gone because the context around it has changed. All you really, not that all you really need is another person. It's still sad the whole world died, but that sense of loss, we have now kind of found a new way to live going forward. That would have been an interesting thing for Emily to realize, like, about her parents' death. Not in the book.
Before they meet up on the dock, there is a scene where Horsifer rips all the jewels, like the Rubaiyat sinks, but she takes all the jewels off of it and like just holds on to them. So when Emily, like when there's that time skip and suddenly they find each other, and it's not like it's the weird thing because you would assume they've just gotten on another ship because they're all still cold, but it feels like it's been a while since it had, like, I don't know. It was a really, like, the description here, one of those things we were talking about where you very rarely feel like you know what the room looks like, where they are in relation to other things. This was a weird time skip because I didn't know how much time had passed at first. It felt like a lot of time. And because the implication was they were at a port initially. Like, it felt like they managed to find each other. And then Horsef is still holding her fist clutched around Jules. It's so cold that she like has to like pry her hand apart.
Oh, that's a really interesting metaphor for how she's valued, jewels over everything else in her life. And now she's gotten that jewel, but at the cost of her hand, right?
Yeah, that would be great if she had actually lost her hand. But no, it's fine. Don't worry. She's great. The two of them are like, oh, we're so happy with each other now. And then there's another time skip. I guess it's the epilogue. And Horsifa gets a copy of the watch that Violet always had. So with the money from the jewels, they're living in New York, I guess. They brought Marco over from Poland. They're living with him. They make a replica. They use the last of their money from the heist. So it only lasted a year. This was supposed to set all of them up, 4 of them up for life. I don't know if she just didn't get enough jewels or she didn't have fucking pockets, which is bizarre because in this era they had pockets. Lots of places to store things. But I would have shoved it in my shoe. Like, I don't know. Anyway,
you swallow it. You pick it out later.
There are options. Anyway, but after a year, the money's gone, but they used the last of it to make a replica of the pocket watch that Violet always had, which was her dad's pocket watch, who Violet didn't love a lot, but she always had it on her. They give it to him, and he's happy, and they're like, we're doing our best, we're living, and nobody's in control of us. And then, but also, it doesn't talk about if they're going to go to Haiti, because the entire thing Emily wanted to do was go to Haiti and see if she could find her mother's family, and it doesn't even say that, like, and in a few years, we're going to try to do that. Unless I missed that. Did it say that, guys? I don't know. By the time I got to the end of this book.
Yeah, I genuinely cannot remember large sections of the end of this book because it was so insanely boring and I was so checked out. I hate Emily and Horsifer together. They're one of the worst couples I've ever read. Not because they're abusive or anything like that. I just hate them because the author is bad at writing. And she's bad at writing relationships. It's amazing to me that she is somehow like this icon of sapphic romance. Whatever.
Listen, we have read some not good romances. This one was
Light Larks was better, honestly.
Light Larks was better. Like, I hate to be that guy, but it's fucking true, guys. And it's weird because it's like so almost non-existent that I hate to call it a romance. Like, it doesn't, there's no body to it. It feels very surface level, like, and the ending and them getting like, I just, like, there were so many decisions that I just can't fully understand or track. There are so many plot holes, like, it just...
If I could leave you guys with one word for this entire review, it's restitution. That's what we are owed. The author wrote this and then sent it out into the world, not caring who it harmed, like a virus or a piece of radioactive jetsam or flotsam. That is what the author did. That is what the author needs to make restitution for. And not just her, all authors who write bad books. This book is genuinely so unskilled. And it's weird because in the epilogue, or not the epilogue, there's a note afterwards talking about the historical accuracy of the book. It feels like, and she's like a professor. She if you look at her things, she's like a professor in Ireland or something like that. It seems like she's a really smart person because she seems thoughtful. She seems like she did research and she knows things. It does not feel like that from the book. And I think maybe that writing should just be something she's not allowed to do anymore. I think that she needs to...
Well...
There's a limited amount of books that people can read in a day. There's a limited amount of publication spots. I think she should not be allowed to write anymore. And this is not a personal grievance against her. I'm just saying for the system and really the good of society if you get disbarred as a lawyer. I think there should be that for authors. I think there should be a disbarment from the ability to write in the future. I think that's really what my takeaway from this book is.
I'm so glad that's what your takeaway. My takeaway is just like, oh God, don't put a subpar heist on the Titanic. Lindbergh, the Ministry of Bad Books will find Adiba Jaigirdar. And then serious shenanigans. And if you or a loved one were harmed by reading 1,000,001, you may be entitled to compensation. Call 1-800
unresolved textual tension. Look, class action lawsuits. That's what these are for. Class action lawsuits. So yeah, that was the book, and that is really what this book made me realize. And I guess in a certain way, I did derive value from this book, in that now I understand that some writers should not be allowed to continue. Some writers need to be stopped.
Well, thanks for joining us. This has been Unresolved Textual Tension and our digestion of the book 1,000,001. Well, we hope you enjoyed it. Well, Will said some very harsh things about the publishing system. Please take everything with a grain of salt. Don't cancel him, guys. He's fine. I promise. I've been friends with him for years. You gotta trust me on this one.
Okay. I really would try to sum up my thoughts in the more way we normally do, but like, this is just not a good book. And the problem is just that the author is not good. I think we've laid out this is such a harder genre to write than Two Henna Businesses Falling in Love.
Shauna, have you ever read some of her, because I know you've read a lot of sapphic novels, and have any of you read her other stuff before? Or would you, based on this review? Would you guys do it? Because I'm kind of interested. Like, I want to see if that other book is better, or is it just like
Maria's the mouse that goes up to the mousetrap and is like, but does this cheese shock me every time? And then she gets shocked again. And then she gets like cancer from it. And she's like, but what about this next time? Will it be a nice like brie on brioche? And no,
listen, it's again. Like Nicolas Cage, or what's that one director whose movies are like hit or miss? The guy who did Sixth Sense.
No, he hasn't done a good book. He hasn't done a good movie in so long.
I know, but my point is, just because someone does a lot of bad doesn't mean that they haven't produced good. Like, he still wrote Sixth Sense.
Magical Shauna says, not yet, but I'm planning to. God help you. Go with God, inshallah. Go with God.
I would love to know how it is. So please like update me, Shauna, as you read it. I would love to know how it goes.
Lindbergh said, this video needs a disclaimer. We love books, really. What's hilarious is like, not only do we like reading books we like more, we actually have a lot. Dark Lord Dirkholm, Sabriel. We're reading the Tamara books. Those are going to be a really good.
The carnivorous horse
Scorpio
one, Scorpio races,
Golden Enclaves. Like, there's a lot of videos where we just straight up talk about how much we like a book, but anti-hater culture is just strong on the internet. And there's certain people who feel you just should never have a negative opinion about anything, even when 8 hours of your life were destroyed. I guess in a certain way, this is sort of like a death of a salesman situation, because I did pick this book. So it is sort of like a tragedy where I was undone by my own actions.
Indeed. Is it that you like books, or you like Naomi Novik? We like other books.
I'm going to form the Book Bar Association. Here are the writers who get to write. Diana Wynne Jones, if she comes back to life. Maggie Svater. Tamsin Muir. Naomi Novik.
Don't forget Garth Nix.
Dan Simmons, if it's not about Muslims. All right, we love you all, our parasocial darlings.